5, 4, 3.
Good morning. Welcome to Licensing Subcommittee this morning, where we're hearing the matter of Albany Green. The chair this morning is Councillor Eleanor Comley, and she will give final instructions and directions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and welcome everybody this morning. And thank you to officers for making it possible for us to conduct this meeting online. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Secretary of State has published the Local Authorities and Police Crime Panel's Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meeting, England and Wales Regulations, which is a mouthful. And under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, the regulations enable the Council to hold committee meetings remotely via a number of means, including telephone and video conferencing. So it's under that legislation that we meet in this way today. I'd first like to invite the members of the committee to introduce themselves. My name's Councillor Eleanor Comley, and I'm a councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down.
Hi, my name is Councillor Fee Hance. I'm a councillor for Redland Ward, and I should disclose at this point, we discussed it beforehand, I live just the other side of the Rainbow Bridge without giving too much information away. So I'm very familiar with the area, but we don't consider that's a conflict of interest. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that we would normally have 3 members of the committee, but the 3rd member of the subcommittee today had to give her apologies. But 2 members still constitutes a quorate subcommittee. So we thought there was no reason to delay this meeting. So just as with a meeting in person, this is an informal and non-adversarial meeting, and all comments and questions should be directed through me as the chair. We will have the report introduced by the licensing officer, which our licensing policy advisor today is Carl Knights. And there'll be an opportunity then for myself and Fee to ask questions and clarifications. We'll then invite the applicant, Mr. Malcolm Haynes, to present the application. And at that point, there'll be an opportunity for members of the committee and our advisors to ask questions and clarifications. I would ask that if any of the relevant persons here, the people who've made representations, have any questions for the applicant, to make it easier in this format, if you save your questions for when you have the mic for your statement, and you will have an opportunity to ask your questions then, because in this format, it's very difficult to go back and forth between people. We don't have any members of the regulatory authorities or police present today, as they've not made any representations, or the representations they've made have been agreed. Then we'll go through all the relevant persons, all the people who've made representations, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to your representation, make your statement, and, as I say, ask any questions you have at that point. Then, in conclusion, we'll invite anyone from the relevant persons who wants to sum up or to make a final statement. And finally, the applicant will be given the last word. After that, we'll retire. You'll go back out into the waiting room, and the committee will discuss and reach our decision. There is a chat function in Zoom, but you can use that to, for example, alert us to a technical issue if you can't hear, or if there's something you need to get the clerk's attention. Don't use it for anything that is part of the meeting, because it won't be webcast, so it won't be part of the public meeting. And finally, as Claudette reminded you, this video is going out on YouTube because this is a public meeting. So anything you say will be out in the public domain. So please don't give away any personal details, and don't say or do anything that you wouldn't want to be seen publicly. Thank you very much. Carl, can I invite you to present the application?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to explain, I might be briefly looking away to the other side of the screen. So I've got two screens. So I'm not paying attention. I'm just looking at another monitor. So the application today is an application for the grant of a new premises licence in respect of Albany Green, Montpelier. The application seeks the sale of alcohol 7 days a week from 12 midday to 10 o'clock in the evening. The provision of films, Fridays and Saturdays from 12 midday to 11 in the evening. It seeks the provision of plays, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays from 12 until 10 o'clock in the evening. And forgive me, but the report appears to have omitted the part of the application in respect of plays, but plays is part of the application. The application also seeks permission for live music, recorded music, performance of dance and anything of a similar description on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays from 12 midday until 10 in the evening. Opening hours are requested 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The application is for a time-limited licence to expire, if granted, on the 5th of February 2026. The capacity is set at 3,000 people. As you know, we have received representations, 25, a number of people are here today. We also received a representation from the Council's Regulatory Services team who submit representations on behalf of a number of council departments. The applicant has agreed conditions, the Regulatory Services team, so that representation effectively has gone away, it's all been agreed. Quite a lot of conditions were agreed, the majority of which were on a licence that was previously enforced at Albany Green, which ran for 1 year. I won't read through the conditions now, you've got them in your paperwork, but what I will read is just some restrictions on the number of events. So the conditions I'm going to read out, in effect, restrict the number of days that the premises can be used to 14 days per calendar year. And there's lots of different figures here, so I'll go through them. There's a maximum of 8 events each year. Each event can last for no more than 3 calendar days. There'll be no more than 3 events per year that can last more than 1 calendar day. There should be no more than 3 events per calendar month, and there should be no events on consecutive days or consecutive weekends, so there must be a break. And there should be no more than 2 events per year which are live music led. I think this will probably get raised, so I will mention it now. The previous licence, which was granted in January 2020, had a slightly different condition in respect to the number of events, and that said there should be a maximum of 8 events per year, and an event should last for 1 calendar day only. I think that's been mentioned in some of the representations. It also said that there should be a maximum of 3 events per calendar month and no events on consecutive days or weekends, similar to the agreed condition in relation to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor Hans, do you have any questions, points of clarification? Ashley, as the legal advisor to the subcommittee, do you have any questions you'd like to clarify with Carl? Okay, thank you. Then we'll proceed. Mr. Malcolm Haynes, would you like to present your application? Can we get you unmuted? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming along to listen to my application. Just to verify, with the application that what I've gone for is a generic license. It means that it gives the ability to put an event on, at certain times. I'm not intending to have any events that last longer than 3 days or even 2 days. I'm just looking to reapply for the license that I had last year. I also appreciate there were conditions put on the license last year, which I wasn't able to demonstrate my willingness to run the events properly, because I was allowed 8 events, but in actual fact, we only did 1 event, which was a Children's Day, and everything was done under the 4 licensing objectives, which covers my...
Hold on a second. I'm really sorry to stop you, Mr. Haynes. I think we've lost Councillor Hans. Are you back?
I'm very sorry. Literally, as soon as you open your mouth, Mr. Haynes, I froze. Everyone froze. So you can start again. I beg your pardon.
Okay.
God knows what's wrong with the Wi-Fi, but it's a bit iffy. So I will attempt to alert everybody if it happens again as soon as possible. My apologies.
Okay, I will start again. Yes, I am here to ask for the application for the license to be renewed. I know our differences on the license application from last year. I have asked for a 5-year license. This is due to the expense of actually applying for a license, and also the fact that, you know, as a business, we have lost lots of money, and, you know, we want to be able to have that ability to be able to put events on, not just music, but also community events within the park. I have no intentions of running an event for 3 days on the trot. That is not my intention at all. As I said, I've had to go for a generic license. A generic license is just an umbrella that allows me to do all the various different licensable activities that we might want to do at various events that might happen throughout the year. 8 events throughout the year out of 365 days is not very many days. So I think all I'm asking is that the conditions that were applied to my license last year, I'm happy to accept those again. I'm happy to demonstrate, if need be, that I'm a responsible person and I'm able to put on events that are safe for the community. I have demonstrated this in the past on Albany Green with the opening event that we did in 2019, and also the Children and Families Day that we did in September 2020. Both events were run extremely professionally, and also with, with the September family event that we did, although we were coming out of lockdown of COVID, we did it under COVID conditions, and we also had no spike with COVID infections at that time when we did that event. So I think everybody's read my application, and I'm very welcome to take questions on my application.
Thank you. Councillor Hans, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I wonder if could you expand a little bit? You're saying you don't intend to have 3-day events. So can you explain a little bit why you need the 3-day event licenses then? Because I'm a bit confused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the 3-day license was put in the event of an unusual situation. Perhaps there was a public holiday that might be announced by the government. Also, when we asked for 3 days consecutive, we're not necessarily looking at the same event. So, for instance, when we did the Children's Day in September 2020, the next day we had a boot sale, we had a yard sale. It was a completely different event. It wasn't music led. The only difference, and why some people seem to think that I ran the event for 2 days, was because I supplied a helter-skelter into the park for the children and the families for the weekend. Although the Saturday was the Children's Day, I, at my expense, left the helter-skelter there till Monday, so that the community had the opportunity to come and enjoy that ride. Now, I don't really see that as a situation where I am looking to make profits. I mean, the Children's Day was a money loss to my business, but I did it for the community and to and for the children who all needed to have some time out. So I'm not looking for 3-day consecutives at all. I don't quite understand why that's gone in there. It should have been 2 as we did last year.
Okay.
I'm still a bit confused. Ashley, or maybe Carl, I don't know. I mean, the kind of event that Mr. Haynes is describing for his second day, the helter-skelter and the boot sale and so forth, would that require a license at all anyway? They're licensable activities? I thought not.
No, that is not require a license.
The scenario that he's envisaging here would have required a 1-day license anyway, rather than a 3-day one. I'm sorry. Can you? You can understand the confusion, and obviously, I'm just trying to tease out for local residents as much for myself what it is you intend to do with these 3-day licenses. There we are.
I don't intend to have. I'm happy to withdraw that. I don't intend to have a 3-day event. Full stop.
Okay, right. That's useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl or Ashley, do you have any questions for Mr. Haynes?
Just one, if I can, then, Chair. Mr. Haynes, so if you not after a 3-day event, would you still be wanting a 2-day event, or would you be
I can certainly tell you now, we would not do a 2-day, let's say, a music event. I would not do it, you know, out of respect for the community and the residents anyway. I would like to have those 2 events that, you know, that I was granted last year for live music, and also that didn't include perhaps if there's something that happens on St. Paul's Carnival Day, which wasn't part of the license, but it was also noted that that could be used as a music live event, but that would be a separate license application which would come through St. Paul's Carnival. So the application was filled out on my behalf, and maybe I should have checked it more thoroughly, but I don't intend to have the 3-day consecutive events. The license that I've gone through is just an umbrella license, which means it allows me to, you know, if it allows, you know, for special holidays or special events to put theatre on, to do fireworks, to have a kids' day, to have some roundabouts. I mean, some of the things aren't licensable activities, but I wanted to capture everything under the license or activities. There was still a condition on my license last year that for a live music event I had to give 3 months notice, and for any other event I had to give 6 weeks notice. Now I'm happy to abide by those conditions again. I'm not looking to change pretty much anything from the license we had last year, apart from the extension of not having to reapply each year.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a final, possibly over egging the pudding clarification? Sorry. So basically looking for 8 one-day licenses per year. 8 events of one day. Is that right?
Yes.
Right, got it. We have an accord, thank you. Well, not an accord, but I understand, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to move on now to the representations from relevant persons. I'm just going to work down the list that I've got in front of me. So can I invite Mr. Roger Yates? You're muted at the moment.
I've asked him to unmute, Chair.
Oh, thank you.
You need to unmute. You need to press that little button which comes up, Roger. Can you see it?
Hello.
There.
That's it.
Great, thank you.
So should I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hi. I want to make a number of points here. I'm reading off a list, so I'll go through it. The first thing that strikes me is that Albany Green is community space. It's a children's playground, it's a sports facility, and it's a kind of village green. So it does invite the question, really, why is this space being monetized in the way that it is? And if these are community events, why are they being put on by a pub and not by the community? So who are the community? They're in this neighborhood, really old people and families with children. They're not the kind of 3,000 visitor events. That's not the community of Montpelier. So that's one point I should make. Now, this is a broader point. The problem for the Star, which I've known for years, is that it's not viable as a pub at the size it is without having the facility to put on events like this. And I'm aware that there's been a lot of investment put in since Mr. Hayes has taken over the pub. And he's mentioned himself, I feel for him. He mentioned himself that he needs to be doing these kind of events in order to pay back his investment. But the community were never asked in the first place whether they wanted a pub which was essentially going to be like perhaps 3 times the size of the original pub that the Star and Garter was. This is not the Star and Garter. It's not the pub it was. The Star and Garter was a small local pub, maximum of about 50 people in there. This has gradually evolved. It evolved through events being put on during the carnival, which is fair enough. But it's getting to the stage now where it's, you know, it's far too big, I'm afraid to say. And it's also true that it's not the part of a pub, it seems to me, to be putting on community events. However nice they are, that's what the community should be doing. And if 8 slots are taken out of the year, that's 8 less slots that the community, the real community, could put something on Albany Green. These are pub events, essentially. This might not be quite relevant, but I'll put it forward anyway. You know, 8 events is basically 2 months of weekends. You know, 2 months during the prime time of the summer. So that's quite a lot of time to take up. Now, why Albany Green? You know, would this kind of thing be allowed on in St Agnes Park, for example, which is a very similar place? I know there isn't a pub there. Or St Andrews Park. You know, when you're talking about 3,000 people coming, these are very, very big events. Why there? And I do know that there are many people that, I mean, I know old people actually move out, go and stay in a bed and breakfast when these things happen. It's so disruptive. It's over fairly quickly, but it's very noisy. So those are now the last point I wanted to make is this, is that essentially this was a space that has been designed by the council over the years to be a space for children, really. Half of the green is a children's playground. There's a sports facility there. I know there are events put on by the children, and you know, all praise to Malcolm for doing that. That's great. That's aside from the general point about whether this is the work of a pub to be doing these kind of community events. But I mean, it's very nice, and I'm sure he's quite genuine about that. But you know, the big music events are not a very good example to young people in the area. You know, it's a pop festival. And is it the right place to be holding regular pop festivals during the summer? So, so that's about it. Now, I hope those points are relevant to the basic discussion today. Thanks for hearing.
Thank you very much. Did you have any questions for Malcolm while you have the floor?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Am I able to reply?
You'll have a chance to sum up at the end.
Okay.
Fee, did you want to ask something? Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to raise my hand virtually
Sorry.
or flap around like a. It's a question for legal regarding the points that Mr. Yates made. Presumably, I mean, it's just to check the legal status of private individuals applying for licenses on council-owned property. I mean, essentially, anybody could. My understanding is anybody could apply for a license of this type in any of the Bristol parks, should they so wish. Yes, am I correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So you have things like Redfest happens in St George's Park, and obviously all the Harbour Festival and that.
Yes, it's less the examples, more kind of principles. I was checking on the principle there that it's anybody's at liberty, and that would include any community.
Can obtain permission from the council to hold an event on council land. Yeah.
Okay, and that would include any local community groups as well. They're also equally at liberty to make an application to hold an event on Albany Green or indeed anywhere else, should they so wish. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. And just to check on the expansion of the premises, that would be occurred via planning, wouldn't it? Were such an expansion to occur rather than through us? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, just a few. Thank you very much for your clarifications. Cheers.
Thank you. We don't have John Booth. He's not come in late, has he? No. Neil Ashmore. And Diana Goodwillie. Now I invite you to unmute.
There we go.
Hi, everybody. Just a couple of comments, really. Living short distance from the Green, we do, but up a hill, do notice an amphitheatre-like effect, and the sound very well, and it is very loud where we live. Also, Roger's point of with 8 events per year, common sense would sort of suggest that they're going to be concentrated in the summer. That's just normal for these things. So we could have most of the events over 2 or 3 months. Feel that 8 events a year is too much, really. Over the past few years, the previous incumbent before Mr. Haynes, commonly known as Dutty Ken, held, I believe, 2, maybe 3 events per year, a different kettle of fish to what Malcolm Haynes is proposing. A little bit confused about how many events of more than one day. I understand Malcolm Haynes doesn't want the 3-day ones, but I thought there was possibility that there might be 2-day events. And perhaps last point might be that we did have the trial license for a year, and through the COVID situation that we all found ourselves in, we didn't really, Mr. Haynes didn't really get a chance to use that license, as for most of that year, the whole country was shut down, and obviously the licensing trade affected drastically. Yeah, so that's me really.
Yeah, hello everyone. My feeling is that these events, as we've known with Ken when he was there, they have expanded to the whole of Bristol. There seems to be somebody that goes around telling them, perhaps. But the last thing that was put on there last year was probably at least half of the people were from out of the area, and it impinges on the area by the fact that they're walking along Coburg Road and down the hill. And I'm also concerned about the traffic and how Mr. Haynes is going to contain that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a question you'd like me to give to Mr. Haynes now about the traffic?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Am I off mute? Can you hear me?
No, you're still.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, thank you, Diana, for that question. I can demonstrate how I can control the traffic, which I did on June the 1st on the opening party in 2019. Shaftesbury Avenue was closed, Brook Hill was closed, Lower Cheltenham Place was closed, and also Brook Road was closed. That was because we thought that we might be overcapacitated, so we went for the road closures for safety, and also we set up steward positions at the end of each road so that we were able to monitor the amount of people coming in to the area, so that we can stop any overcrowding that's happening. And also the fact that we went for the road closures, it meant that we didn't have traffic coming into the area where there were lots of pedestrians coming to and from the event. I demonstrated this in 2019. There was no necessity to have road closures for the event I did in 2020 for the Kids and Family Day. The capacity for that was reduced to £1,000 with the understanding of the licensing and the police. That's the level that we were going to hold that event at. And in actual fact, we had about 800 people attend, for which over 50% were children. So I do take dispute with the fact that people seem to think that I want to hold lots of pop festivals. That is not the case at all. I would like to do, as Roger said and someone else, that Ken used to do in the past. He would have 2 or 3 events a year, most of the time unlicensed. All I'm doing is trying to do things by the book, have a license, have procedures set in place so that I can satisfy the 4 main licensing objective regulations and run a safe event. That is all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to take over and put a pop festival on Albany Green. Two events of the year. Yes, I would like them to be music related. The Children's Day was music related, and it was full of children performing on that day all day. Thank you.
Thank you. So David Sproxton. I can't.
Hello, that's me here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, Diane and Roger have made the key point, which I think 8 events across the summer could put the park out of bounds for a lot of local families. Events won't be happening in the winter, I'm sure. And that's my concern. Across the summer, when kids are at home, there's not a lot of facilities in the area for local kids. So that number, that's an event every other week across the summer, if that number of events actually happens, which seems to take a public park out of the public domain, and you're going to have to pay to get in to attend those events, which seems a little bit unfair to the local community. Well, Mr. Haynes might like to clarify exactly the number of events he's planning to hold over that summer period. It has been used quite heavily over this lockdown. And I think there is an issue with the noise, and indeed if 3,000 people do come in, most of those won't be from the community, and they tend to hang around a lot longer than the official hours. That's a concern for neighbours, because that rowdiness does roll on into the wee small hours. We know that, and that can be quite disturbing for us neighbours. But I think that's my main concern, is the sheer number of likely events where you're locking out the local community from what is effectively a public park and the amenities that are there for kids across the summer months.
Thank you. Theo Wood.
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Great.
My biggest concern is this 3,000 limit. I just heard that you were saying the event last summer was 800 and they had a limit of 1,000. Well, if you had, I mean, I walked around and it was fairly busy. It was okay, but if you had 3 times that many people, I do think that 3,000 is too many, that 3,000 have to get here. They have to maybe bring their cars and park in surrounding roads, because we've heard, I mean, social media spreads. Everybody loves a festival, and social media spreads word very quickly. So that's my main concern, as well as the summer month. Summer months. I mean, it's 8 events, so it could be 2 events over 4 months. Well, that's like the whole summer, isn't it? So those are my concerns. The 3,000. The 3,000. That is allowed. If it went down a bit, well, it went down probably to half that, it might be better.
Can I just check? I'm not sure who would have the answer to this, but that 3,000 limit, does that come from a risk assessment?
That came from a license that was granted for June the 1st, 2019, where Sage put a limit with reviewing our plans and the area. A 3,000 limit was put on the premises license.
Right, so that was reviewed as safe by Sage. Yeah. I take the point that it must a lot of people to get in and out of the area, but it's been reviewed as safe by Sage.
I would like to also say that the 3,000 was that's just an upper limit, and also that for that event, it did include closing the roads. I don't really envisage seeing that happening again, not to that scale, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Hans?
Again, like you, Ellen, I'm not too sure who to address this to, but there are issues around the noise. Carl, can you tell me if there's any complaints at any of the events that Mr. Haynes has held at the premises as resulting from the noise? And just to, it was quite a long application, so forgive me if I've not remembered every single detail, but is it a pay-to-enter event, and what are the dispersal plans afterwards? Is there any information about how crowds will be dispersed at the end of the events? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the complaints, I don't have any information if any complaints were received. I can only assume if they were, that would have been raised in the Regulatory Services Rep, and they would have had an issue with the application, and they're happy for the application to be granted subject to the conditions agreed. So I'd have to assume that there either wasn't any, or if there were, they're happy with the conditions that are proposed to prevent any further issues occurring. In terms of the dispersal plans, there's an event management plan that's coming with the application, which details all aspects of how the event will be run, including that side of things. All events would have to go through SAGE in any event, and the parks team would also have to sign off. So that will always be considered for every event by the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's also the issue of, somebody raised the issue about people paying to get onto the green. Is that the plan? I can't remember, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Martin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there'll all be free events. That's my understanding.
They have all been free events, and it's my intention to keep them as free events. I suppose if there wasn't a situation where we were worried about the amount of people who would come to the event, then we might actually look at putting a small charge in order to deter people from coming to that event. But it's a free event, and the two main events that I've done have been free and safe.
Thank you for that clarification. Cheers. Thanks, both.
Can I move on now to Angela Lepeuple?
Hi. Can everybody hear me okay? Sorry
about that. Thank you.
Clicking away, nothing was happening. I'm just going to refer to my notes. Some of the questions have, I think, have already been addressed during the opening remarks from the council officer about the sort of talks that have been had to mitigate some of these issues prior to today. So if I can ask a few questions, and perhaps Malcolm can, rather than answer them individually, just sort of as part of his summing up, address some of the issues. Is that okay? The previously objected to proposals from January 2020, we'd been satisfied with the amended licensing agreement to allow for a limited number of events, with each event lasting no more than a day and so on. Malcolm's already addressed some of the issues around why he's now applying for a 5-year license, but I can understand in terms of the cost and the bureaucracy, if you like, of doing so. But I'm still sort of somewhat anxious about the fact that the agreement made previously for 1 year, I thought that, he would have come to this meeting with a similar proposal for 1 year, which I think all of us, perhaps I can say, would have looked on perhaps more favourably at the beginning than this sort of red rag to a bull approach, perhaps, of asking for a 5-year one. Can I also mention that I can't see any mention of the 2020 restrictions in the new application, which includes giving adequate notice to the community. Other than the notice through our letterbox to the properties towards the Brook Hill end of Coburg Road, there was no other effort made to consult with us, and quite a few, in fact, the majority of the households down Coburg Road, because we have a rather wonderful street WhatsApp group, knew nothing about these proposals, and they do overlook their properties, their back gardens do overlook the green and the pub. As has been said by some of the others, we've yet to determine the impact of the proposed live music events on us and our neighbours, and we do know from previous live music events and even recorded music events at the Star and Garter in the past that the sound does travel up, not just to Coburg Road, but as some of the people have already said, to York Road, Richmond Road and beyond. We've not had the time to gauge, and Malcolm said this himself, the impact of things like the noise, the traffic, the parking. I can see what he means about shutting off the roads, but that means that people will have to park elsewhere. And there were problems during the last event in terms of parking around our area. And voices carry as well, given the nature of the valley that the pub and the green sit in. And what I want to know really is what he's going to do to sort of mitigate that sort of sound issue. I was also concerned about the application for opening hours. It might just be me, but it seemed to imply a period of 24 hours at a time. That I'm assuming is perhaps to include for tidying up, taking things down. But can you sort of explain that, clarify that a bit more about the sort of 24-hour period?
I think I can clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
The green is public space. It's not possible to have a closing time. So the event will finish according to the hours that are allowed for the different activities, but you can't really have a closing time for the play park because it's not a space that can be closed.
No, but that certainly does. I mean, thank you for that clarification.
So
but it does mean that people can be and have been hanging around for hours afterwards because you can't sort of get them to move on as it's a public space. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway.
They can be following the dispersal plan. They can be cleared, but just you can't have an official closing time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And almost at the end here, the application is for all events to be non-ticketed. Malcolm's, I think, explained that he's talking about them being free events. But in that case, how do you control the numbers? How do you know that there will be 3,000? How do you know? Have you got stewards, clicking people in and out? I mean, how people wandering through to get to the shops or, just going about their business? Are they being counted in the numbers because they're going through a public area? That was just one query I had. And finally, really, it was just to point out that having, I'm sure, noted the many and various objections of the local community last year, the surprise really that Malcolm has apparently seems to have ignored some of those and set out his wishes regardless. We can certainly appreciate the time, the effort, the money that Malcolm and his team have put in to the pub and the outside areas over the last year. I've watched it and been quite amazed at what it's managed to do and what it's managed to put up, and it looks very good. And I think it's some way towards making a pub work, but including a public green space, as Roger so eloquently explained about the facility there of Albany Green. I feel what he's applying for now is for far too much over too long a period, and using that common green space really as a sort of extension of the pub or making it into a pub beer garden. And those are the issues that I have concern with. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So there were a number of questions in there. Mr. Haynes, could you pick up the point about how you'll control the numbers at these events?
Well, we control the numbers by doing a basic risk assessment of whatever the event is going to be, and we do click people in and out on our stewards on the gates. And when we had a very large capacity in 2019, we had people clicking people in at the end of Shaftesbury Avenue, Brook Hill, Brook Road, etc. So there are we do have measures in place to control the numbers, and we do know how many people come. Just following on that to the disbursement as well, on the two events that I have done, we've kept security on for an hour longer than the event had, since closing, in order to help disperse the crowds, leaving the area. And we do ask people to leave the area quietly and respect the residents. And I do feel we do as much as we possibly can in order to mitigate those situations. I just wanted to also pick up an answer with regards to the Roger's point, and I also Diana's, that yes, I agree that the park does belong to children. It is a community park, but I've had not one child come up to me, or not one mother come up to me and say, "You're taking over the park. You know, you're taking it away from our children." I've had nothing but praise and actual, you know, gratitude for the things that I've done for the community. I support the St. Barnabas School next door. We have an outreach group that we put on Facebook, and we do allow everybody to join that outreach group. And we have actually invited people to send us their emails, and which we did last year. So I do think that, you know, as a publican, I have been trying to do everything to do things for the community. That's, you know, that's, and I take, you know, I take argument with the fact that I'm taking the park away from the community and the children, because that's not what I see at all. And I live on the park.
Thank you. Councillor Hans?
Can I just quickly clarify? I mean, I think we've touched on the issue of the use of the park before, but would that fall under any of the 4 licensing objectives anyway? Because I suspect it wouldn't. But if someone could clarify for me, thank you. Oh, shut myself off rather than miss sound, beg your pardon. Could either Carl or Ashley help out with that one?
Sorry, Councillor, in terms of whether they're allowed to use the park for...
Yeah, the use of the park and whether it's taking the use over the community. I don't quite see how that... Just to kind of clarify, because we are looking at whether this application falls in the 4 licensing objectives, and I don't think the kind of rights and wrongs of a private individual or company using the park falls within any of those objectives. I think. Sure.
That's right, Councillor.
Okay.
I think there have even been legal challenges on the ability of councils to use parks for festivals. I think there was a challenge against Haringey Council in London, which failed because councils can use parks for events like this.
The reason I raise
not to do the Licensing Act.
Yeah, with everyone's sympathy with people's concerns about that, it's something that we'd have to set aside at this point anyway, I think. Yeah, okay, thank you.
While I've got you, Carl, I've got a couple of other points of clarification that came out of Angela's statement. If a licence is granted for 5 years, what would be the options available if there were problems with that licence?
Sure. So once a licence is granted, it can always be reviewed, and any person can submit an application to review a licence. It's a free process, it doesn't cost anything. It's just an application form that needs to be completed and served on the licence holder and various council departments and so on. People can also complain. They can complain to us, they can complain to pollution control, or perhaps complain to the parks team directly, because obviously every event's going to have to be approved by the parks team, and they're going to have to give Mr. Haynes permission to use the park. If there are complaints and it does cause problems, then they may withhold permission, irrespective of the fact that there's a licence in place.
Thank you. And can I also just clarify, were all the advertising requirements for this application met? Because I don't think we covered that at the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, they were.
Anything that was done that was over and above what's required.
That's right. And I appreciate this is sometimes disappointing for residents, because licensing isn't the same as planning, where with a planning application, the council writes to residents in the area. That's not permitted under the Licensing Act. So the application gets advertised on the council website, at the premises by way of some notices, which did happen in this occasion, and also once in a local newspaper. All of that happened, so it was advertised correctly.
Thank you. Now, can we move on to Tony Mason, please?
Right, is that working?
Yes, that's great, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mason, your wife is in the room on her device, so there's an echo because the sound is bouncing through her device and into your device. She will need to take the volume off of hers, disable the audio, or sit with you on your device.
Mute. Sorry,
yeah, it's bouncing around. Can you sit together on one device and shut down the other device if you can't take the audio out?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, turn the sound right there.
Is that all right now?
No. Yeah.
Is that okay? I can still. Can you talk to us, Tony, so we could see?
Right. Okay. This is a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about and ask about has already been dealt with. So I'm going to be coming up with some rather staccato comments on this. The most recent thing that was mentioned is about from the chair was what we could do, what the public could do if there were problems with events under this 5 years. I'm wary of the review process. In general, there is a very high threshold for cancelling something that's already been issued. So I would be concerned about that being seen as an adequate remedy for the community. Quite a lot has been made at the hearing last year and again this year that the opening event in 2019 produced no complaints. A lot of the community found it very noisy, excessively noisy, and excessively disruptive, with cars, as with Carnival, cars being left in unsafe and problematic places all over Montpelier by people driving into the area. So that, but people accepted that this was a new landlord who put a lot of money into the pub and wanted to celebrate opening. So everybody cut him some slack. Had we known it was going to be used as justification for ongoing licenses, and in fact that ongoing licenses were part of the business plan of the applicant, we would have, a storm would have been raised. I think all of the people who are attending this meeting would back me up on that. I think before the applicant needs to demonstrate that he has an adequate system of notifying the community of events in advance. There was no notification of the children's event in August last year. Again, it was difficult circumstances. Obviously, everybody needed cheering up. So, it's a spur of the, relatively spur of the moment thing. Again, people cut it, prepared to cut him some slack on that. But if another license, particularly if the committee contemplate issuing a license for 5 years, before it's granted, the applicant needs to set up a UK GDPR compliant form of notification for local residents, because otherwise things will be sprung on us again. I think those are really, additional points to ones that have been made. There isn't really, to me, any purpose in revisiting whether or not a license should be granted, because that decision was made last year and there's been no evidence to indicate that there shouldn't be a 1-year license granted this year. But I do feel that a 1-year license is all that should be granted. I do accept the financial cost of that, but there is also the non-financial cost to the community that has to be borne in mind, the potential non-financial cost to the community. So, and as a further point, ticketing, I would be, and I'm sure most of the community would be utterly opposed to paid for ticketing for what are supposed to be community events, not run for profit. Free ticketing, perhaps with a preference for some sort of precedence for local residents could be acceptable if it's felt that numbers need to be restricted and need to be controlled in some way. But paid for tickets for something which is not a festival seems to me quite wrong. Oh yeah, another bit on numbers. We've got 3,000 people allowed. At the opening event, there were some very prestigious acts put on. Potentially, people will be aware that that happened on the first live music event. There may be anticipation of the so-called surprise guests coming along. It'll spread on social media, and it's not just the 3,000 people that are permitted by the license that concern me. It's the other 3,000 that turn up in Montpelier and can't get it onto Albany Green, but will be crammed in trying to hear as best they can in the surrounding streets. So, numbers are a concern, and given that potential, I think a 5-year license is again excessive. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on now to Margaret Mason?
Can you hear me now?
Can you do the same?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Mason, can you turn your sound right down?
Is this unanticipated problem with 2 devices, which we will get it better right next time? Anyway, I am
Mr. Mason, can you turn your sound right down so you don't have the echo?
Sorry, we didn't. Can you hear me now? Now turn mine up. See, I told you.
You're fine. We can hear you fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about all that. I am concerned about the taking over of the green. It's a densely populated area, and that bit of green is very much needed and very well used. And to have it fenced off with security guards just isn't right. And we heard last time, the previous hearing, which led to the licence for 1 year in 2020, we heard that time from local grandmothers upset that they couldn't take their little ones down to the swings. And it's simply not true that Malcolm's received nothing but praise. At that meeting, we heard that people who went into the pub to complain about the deafening noise, which went on for hours and hours, got very rude responses and felt intimidated. So it's simply not true that he's had nothing but praise. And I am very concerned about the large numbers that would be attracted, and how I really think there must be a limit much less than 3,000. I would like to ask Malcolm, how many came to the opening party? Do you know?
Would you take that question, Mr. Haynes?
Well, it's my understanding it was about 3,000. I had my security personnel here, and at no time did we feel that we exceeded our capacity.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And at that event, there was some antisocial behaviour, people having their front gardens use as toilets. And of course, there's also public health concerns at present about large gatherings. But mainly, I want to tell you about the noise. I mean, you might think that living in York Road, as we do, that's 3 roads up the hill from Albany Green and the Star and Garter, we wouldn't be too badly affected, but we really are. Because the ground rises, there is an amphitheatre effect, which Neil referred to, so it's actually louder up here. When you go down the hill to hear where the noise is coming from, it actually gets quieter as you walk down Brook Hill. And the level of noise here is unbelievable. My neighbour recorded 65 decibels inside his house. And you can't enjoy being in your garden. You go out the front and the noise bounces off the houses across the road. There's just no escape. And in the garden, you can't hear yourself think, let alone have a conversation. It is exhausting. It goes on for hours and hours. I mean, I'm 81 and I want to be able to enjoy being in my garden. I don't want to have to go out or have to go away, as has been suggested. And last time, the last hearing, Environmental Health said they hadn't received complaints, and the police said the same, I think. They aren't even open, Environmental Health, when it's going on. And as Tony said, everybody cut him some slack because it's the opening party. But they did say that next time complaints could be received after the event during the next week or 10 days. And I know I'm not alone in this, far from it, about minding the sound. And like other people, I feel if the application was granted in full, whether it's 8 events, 8 to 10, or 10 to 15, which I believe is on some notices around the green, possibly lasting 3 consecutive days, bound to be mostly in the summer, it would have a devastating effect on the quality of life for hundreds of people for 5 years. I strongly feel that the most that should be granted is another 12-month license, a trial period, if you like, on the same conditions that were agreed for 2020. Personally, I think even that was too much. We already have Carnival, which we accept with massive impact. And obviously the Star and Garter should be allowed to participate in that. So I'd suggest that the Star and Garter be allowed just one annual live music event, perhaps their birthday party on the opening anniversary, and see how that went. Personally, that's all I would like to see. But otherwise, what was agreed last year should be repeated. And, you know, that couldn't happen. We don't have the evidence to justify going ahead on any different basis, as far as I can see. And I've been aware of the Star and Garter all the 45 years I've lived here as a small local pub. I mean, the refurbishment, they made it look great. I congratulate them and I wish them well, but as a local pub, not a music destination. This is a small local pub in a residential area, and you can't mitigate the effect on their local community. There's no way you can mitigate it. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Can we move on now to Mr. Ben Steiner?
That's me. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, I mean, I think most of what I was going to say has kind of already been raised, but I'll just kind of say a few short things. But I mean, I would kind of want to pick up on something that was just said, and just say to Malcolm, you know, I mean, Malcolm, I love your pub. You know, I drink. You know, I live up on York Road. I drink. Well, you know, when we were allowed in pubs, I drink in the Star and Garter. You know, hopefully I'll be allowed to drink in there again after this. You know, I think what you did with the inside, you know, I'm glad that you bought it, that you saved it from being turned into flats. I think what you've done with the inside is stunning, and you know, the way you've kind of captured the local history and all of that is brilliant. The outside, you know, until you built that lean-to thing, the outside was beautiful as well. So you know, I'm a big fan of the of the pub, and I was at the birthday thing, and I thought that was great. But I think the problem here is the scope of what is being asked for, and it kind of seems from hearing kind of Malcolm speak and kind of respond to various objections, is that there's a kind of a massive disconnect. If what Malcolm is saying is to be believed, and I'm not Malcolm saying that it shouldn't be, but if what he's saying is to be believed, there's a massive disconnect between what his intentions are and the scope of the license that he's requesting. Because what Malcolm's requesting, and I think sorry, Angela, I think it is, you know, used the phrase red rag to a bull. What Malcolm's asking for leaves open the potential for 5 years of Albany Green to be 5 summers in a row to be for Albany Green to be completely dominated by the Star and Garter, and for it to essentially become the Star and Garter's beer garden, which I think may not be Malcolm's intention, but that is what the license that he's applying for kind of would allow. So it has already been kind of pointed out, under the terms of this license, Malcolm could have a music event, you know, be it live music or, you know, recorded music, whatever, you know, DJs and what have you. You could have from late June till early September, every other weekend, you could be having like a late night, you know, you could basically be having like a mini one-day festival every other weekend. for the entirety of the summer, for 5 summers in a row, which, as I say, may not be Malcolm's intention, but that is what the license would allow. And I think all of us are just kind of horrified by that possibility.
Could I just ask for clarification on that, Carl? I thought when you were introducing, you said that it was a maximum of 3 live music-led events.
Yes, Chair. So it's 2 live music-led events per year.
So
So that's live music-led events. I mean, I'm not sure what live music-led means, as in, can you have bands, but the headliner is pre-recorded music? I mean, that would actually be really useful probably for all of us to have clarification on what. I mean, because as you can tell, obviously, what the main thing that we're all worried about is really loud late-night music events, over the course of the summer. So, I mean, I don't know if we could have clarification on what exactly is allowed or is being asked for, in that license. Because my understanding is there's live music and then there's presumably recorded music, which means DJs. And so, I mean, obviously, it doesn't really, in terms of this discussion, it doesn't really matter whether the music is live or pre-recorded. It's just loud music going on until whatever time of night. So again, I suppose really the question is, are we right in thinking that within the scope of what Malcolm is asking for, we could potentially have, whether it's his intention or not, we could potentially have loud music every other weekend for 8 alternate weekends across the summer?
Councillor Hans.
I was going to let Carl answer the question first, and I was going to ask a question. So
okay.
Yes.
Carl, can you clarify the difference between a music-led event and the other event? Is there a clarification available?
Well, with any sort of license condition, Chair, you'll probably have 2 different lawyers arguing 2 different interpretations. So it could perhaps be sensible to try and clarify, and if the license is granted, to clarify what is meant by a live music-led event, or change it to music-led event. At least there's no confusion between recorded music and live music. And it couldn't perhaps be, for example, you have 6 recorded music-led events and then 2 live music-led events. I know that's not Mr. Haynes' intention from what he's saying today, but obviously, if you wanted to ensure that couldn't happen, bearing in mind the license could obviously be transferred to another party, then you might want to work that into the license if you were minded to grant it today.
But I mean, I suppose, excuse me, sorry, thank you for that. But I think the point I was trying to make was that from the resident's point of view, whether the event is live music or recorded music is totally irrelevant. It's just a matter of it's really loud music going on. I'm not saying that, as I said, I attended the birthday, sort of, the kind of the reopening party, and really enjoyed it, and I enjoy Carnival and all of that. But it's what we were worried about, obviously, is the frequency of the events, and again, it's this what seems to be, on the basis of what Malcolm's been saying, it's just there just seems to be a disconnect between what is being asked for and what he intends. And I imagine we'd all feel a lot better if the terms of the license, were it to be granted, were quite considerably amended to reflect what Malcolm is saying that he actually wants, which is a couple of music sort of grown-up orientated events a year, but actually like a real mix of children's events. And I mean, I believe he mentioned even like theatre and stuff like that. So at the moment we just have, it's just completely open, and were it to be granted in its current form, it's completely down to Malcolm's discretion what the nature of those events is. Whereas if the license, were it to be granted, were amended to kind of reflect what Malcolm has been saying he wants to do, then I think we'd all feel a lot better about it. But I think as to the last thing I was going to say is just the general point of it being granted for 5 years. I mean, that's just, it just, what Malcolm has in mind might be amazing, and there might be no problems. Equally, it might really not be, it might be very detrimental to the area, and there might be lots of problems, and we don't know. And so I think to kind of throw the door open, for 5 years, which is obviously, it's a long time. I just can't, I just can't think how that would be kind of acceptable to the community. And that's it.
Thank you. Can I move on now to Daphne Muir? Oh, sorry, Fee, did you have another question? Apologies.
It's sort of related to what Ben was saying. I mean, how to ask Carl and or Ashley how far we can regulate or define types of events over those 8 events. And also just probably a question for Carl, because there's been a couple of issues arising around noise. And I was a bit concerned to hear that there appears to be no mechanism for reporting noise whilst the event was going on over the weekends. Can someone help out on that? I'm aware that regulatory services aren't here, but if they could shed any light, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So in terms of reporting noise, I'm afraid I can't help it. I don't work in the enforcement team and I don't know their processes, I'm afraid. So I mean, I am aware, obviously, their services are cut back compared to how they were when things were different, but whether you can report it immediately, I don't know. One of the conditions that has been put forward, though, is that if complaints are received, which obviously could be after the event, then steps need to be taken to ensure noise levels are amended in the future. So, I mean, I know that doesn't help on the day itself, but it would help at a future event. I'm sorry, what was you had a first question as well, Councillor?
Yeah, the other one was about the issue that Ben raised about the variety and type of events. Now, are we able to stipulate within our licence no more than 2 music-led events, no more than 5 theatre events or whatever, you know?
Sure.
Can we condition it in that way if were we so minded?
Sure. So as long as the conditions are appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, then yes. Okay. So if you feel it's appropriate to do so, then you can condition it in any way you see fit.
Great. Okay, thanks. Right. Sorry about that, Dee.
Sorry about that. Would you like to go ahead now, Ms. Muir?
Yeah, sure. The name's Daphne Muir. I've been a resident here for 40 years and have seen the change in pubs, whether it was run by Hector or by Ken or now by Malcolm. And as everyone agrees, this is a small local pub. And if you look at the business model of small local pubs, they don't work anymore. You know, Prince of Wales, Inkerman, the Duke. So the enormous amount of money that's been invested in this one can only be got back if it becomes an events place and if our green becomes a pub garden. So we shouldn't just be looking at the application for these events, but what this does year round to our local children's playground and green. Yeah. So we're not this isn't a Stokes Croft, it's not an Eastville Park. This is a very small green that then becomes a centre for people to come and sit around drinking. Not just when these events are held, but all the time. And if you look at the extension, the wooden extension that's been made outside of the pub, over some private land and some public land, the music, even day by day, never mind on the events, has to come out through the windows. Now, if you were ever with Ken or Hector when they run the pub, essentially the music was enclosed within those walls, and except for 1 or 2 little events, didn't impinge on us, on our green, on our park, on our space, and there are very few green spaces here. Now, because you've got this open wooden structure, the music comes out through the window. So we're not just talking the events, we're talking pretty constant music. Whenever it's sunny, everyone can make a bit of money, the music blasts out on the green. What it then attracts is that people see this as a hangout area. Now, for years, the council did not put a bench in our park because it encouraged some kind of hanging around, which wasn't very helpful to the park. Suddenly, we have 3 pub benches and tables out in the green. The neighbours will tell you already just having a table there has affected who is right outside almost their front door and what's going on. So we're talking about a pub that by its events, by its structures, by its putting stuff out on our green is changing the ambience of what our green and our park is. And I would dearly like the licensing committee to come and talk to some neighbours who have felt intimidated, some neighbours who have tried to discuss issues. I'd like them to come and talk to some of these people. I'd like them to come and see, you know, this isn't Stokes Croft. This is a residential area with children and older people. You have to think really carefully about what we let our green spaces become. I think I'm just asking you to think about that very, very carefully for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody knows about the benches. Are they parks benches or do they belong to the pub?
I put the benches in the park as I had no use for them, and I thought that people would like to sit down on the bench.
Locals have found them very, not very useful to have there.
No one's come to complain to me about the benches being in the park. I'll quite happily take away, and then I can let people know that you've objected to the benches being in the park.
No problem. I've got lots of people who do object to them. I'll bring them round to you, Malcolm.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on to the summing up. This is not a point to introduce new information, but if anyone would like to say something just to sum up before we move on, I'll just quickly go through everyone's names to give you a chance to sum up if you wish to. Roger Yates.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think it's boiling down, isn't it, to how many music events and what constitutes a music event. So recorded music is probably louder than live music. What I would like to see is that should be limited at the very least. It should be limited to perhaps one or two events, one on the festival, one on the carnival, and maybe one at another time, right? And just finally, I must say I've got some skin in the game here, because I am the first person to ever put music on outside of the Star and Garter in 1988 when Hector was there. So you can all blame me, right? But it was a 1,000-watt PA and there were about 50 people out there and we knew everybody, right? It gradually escalated from there. So I sort of regret that in a way. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil and Di?
Very quickly, it's how the loudness of the music is quantified. It does seem that the systems that Malcolm uses are louder than those that Ken used. I don't know whether that is the case. It's a matter of how many watts, how many dBAs. It seems a lot louder, and how can that be quantified and regulated, perhaps, so we don't get so much disturbance.
Thank you. David Sproxton?
Yeah, I just think we need to watch the creeping privatisation of a public space.
And Theo Wood? Hold on, you're muted.
I think we really need to think seriously about a 5-year extension at this stage, that to the licence that should be 5 years, considering all the issues that have come up, and a lot of other people have commented on the issues, so I don't have to repeat them all. But also we still haven't had a trial of what's happened, which we had last year. It was a trial. So in that sense, I am aware of the financial difficulties, but a 5-year extension, maybe a 1-year extension, I don't know. Can that be worked?
Thank you. Angela?
Hi, just to reiterate concerns about Albany Green becoming bit by bit a pub beer garden rather than a community place, and also like Theo again just about the in principle to have a 1-year reviewable suck it and see approach. I would very much be in favour of, but not this 5-year approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony and Margaret? Nothing to add. Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, just to reiterate that the the scope of what's being asked for just feels far too broad, and that if, like everyone else, I agree that that if it's granted, it should be 1 year, and also if it's granted, it should be heavily amended so that it's in line with what Malcolm says he wants to do. Because I just think it's obviously it's illegal, it's a license. It should be it should be kind of baked in to what is granted if a license is granted.
Sorry, Margaret, did you want to say something?
Yes, I did. I have. I sadly, I think we can't have, I agree with not having benches. Everywhere you put them, you get antisocial behaviour. Unfortunately, we can't have them outside the shops, what's sometimes called Picton Square and is properly Bath buildings outside Bellstein. And same as it happened on the Turbo Island. You just can't have benches and tables without antisocial behaviour later in the evening, gathering there, hanging out, drinking. And I believe that the recorded music, didn't you say last hearing, Malcolm, was it 400 watts, your speakers? Is that right?
Question?
Mm?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question properly.
I thought that at the last hearing, the previous hearing, you said your speakers were 400 watts.
Summing up, Chair.
I'm sorry, we can't start with another round of new questions at this point. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I believe we should have a 12-month review trial period as before, and there have been lots of complaints, which are very rudely received by people going into the pub, when people go into the pub and complain. Okay, finished.
Thank you. And Daphne Muir?
Just serious concerns about, becoming a kind of Stokes Croft with not just the day to day with benches, with music coming out the windows, which you never had before with the other landlords. It's very worrying, and I would like people to come and talk to immediate neighbours who do find it quite intimidating to talk to the current landlord at the moment.
Right. Mr. Haynes, as the applicant, you have the final opportunity to sum up.
Okay, well, thank you for all your representations. I do take them very seriously, and I'm not being flippant about my attitude to your concerns. They are genuine concerns. I do take question with, it's been said that people have come into the pub and been met with a rude, yes, I'm not saying they've complained to me and said that I've been rude to them, but I can't remember any situations where someone's come and complained to me and I've been rude to them. So I'm sorry, I don't understand where that's come from. With regards to the license and the 5-year period, again, I go back to the reason being is because it can be a costly process to get the license, and I also take on board your concerns about me asking for a 5-year period. I would like the committee and the licensing to, but I am willing to look at that and say, well, look, perhaps you could give me a 2 or 3 year period. I see that would be a compromise on my part. With regards to the 8 events a year, yes, it's my intention for 2 of them to be music-led, meaning where music is very much the attraction of the day, whether that's mainly in live bands. The other events are community events that I want to do, and I've had a number of organisations already approach me about coming to do events under the umbrella of the licence that I would like to obtain for Albany Green. And as I said, I haven't continuously support St Barnabas School, so I don't really get the accusations about I'm taking things away from for the children and the families, because the 2 events that I've done, we've actually gone out of our way to make sure that there are plenty of family and children's activities included in that day, and also the timescale where most of you are highlighting that I would want to put all the events on over the summer period. This is not true. This is not true at all. A year is a long time. there's Easter, there's Guy Fawkes, there's Christmas. There's various other times in the calendar where it would be appropriate, to put an event on that kind of represents, the type of year or the event that we would do. So that's why I've asked for the flexibility on the license. And as one of the councillors pointed out, the police pointed out, that you can't close the park. I do believe that my dispersant processes are good and adequate. I don't encourage people to hang about in the park. I completely take on board about the benches. I'm sorry. I actually thought I was doing a kindness to the community, but I will take them away, and I'll put them away so nobody can sit down in the park. And I also dispute what Demur said about music coming out the windows. I don't have a speaker outside. I have a small ghetto blaster in the window of the pub. There is no speaker outside because my license does not allow me to have a speaker outside the pub. So I do abide by my license, and all I'm asking is for the license to be renewed for a further 3 to 5 years. I don't really have much else to say other than some of the things I take on board. I see your concerns, but I think if you have an event anywhere, you're going to get a certain amount of disruption within that area, and I've done everything I can to try and limit the disruption that may have been caused, on the events that I have done. Yeah, that's
Thank you.
Finally finished.
Thank you all so much for your time and for speaking so openly and listening to one another. I really appreciate it. So what will happen now is you will all be removed back to the waiting room while myself and Councillor Hans deliberate. Claudette, do you want to take charge?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we're going to put all the relevant parties and the applicant, Mr. Hayes, back in the waiting room, and we will ping you a message or send you an email to say that we've finished deliberating and to come back in for the decision. So my colleague will start moving you out into the waiting room, but don't close down your devices, else you will disappear. And we will go into, and so if I could ask the panel to accept the breakout room invitation, that would be absolutely great. Thank you. And then we will put a notice up for those watching online that we are in deliberation. I can't say whether it be 15 minutes or 45 minutes, so can you bear with us, please? So you will be moving shortly. Yeah, okay, back into the waiting room. And Amar, if you could put the deliberation sign up, and I will indicate to everybody when we've concluded our decision making. Thank you. Amara, you could admit them all. Did you send them that message, please? Can
Yep.
we admit everybody in? Thank you. See that some people are not back. Just bear with me, Chair. Just waiting for a couple more people, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. We're still live.
I'm not on the screen yet.
That's okay. That's fine. Right then, I think everybody's back. Mr. Mason, I can't see your wife, but I would assume that she's in the vicinity. Okay, that's fine. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. So we've considered the application and all representations made. I'd like to highlight again, as Councillor Hans clarified during the proceedings, that the use of public space is not a licensing matter, and we are not able to give that consideration in this process. Considering all the evidence before us, we made the decision to grant the application subject to additional conditions which we felt were necessary to uphold the licensing objectives. We noted the lack of objections from the police or from environmental health, and we made the decision to grant the application for the 5-year licence as applied, subject to additional conditions. There were additional conditions agreed with regulatory services in relation to noise control. These include requirements for risk assessments to be carried out for noise and for a telephone number to be made available for residents to contact the applicant if there is a disturbance during the event. In addition, conditions are to be applied to limit the number of events to 8 in a calendar year and to limit the length of an event to 1 day. Events cannot take place on consecutive days, and events cannot take place on consecutive weekends, so that no more than 2 events take place in any calendar month. When it comes to music-led events, and we've clarified that that is music-led rather than specifically live music-led. When it comes to music-led events, these are limited to no more than 2 in a year and no more than 1 music-led event in any calendar month. That's the conditions that we put in place, and we felt that with those additional conditions from regulatory services and with the conditions limiting the number of events, it was appropriate to grant this application and is in keeping with the upholding of the licensing objectives. Thank you all very much. That concludes the hearing.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. The meeting now can be concluded. Thank you, Amara.
Thank you all.
Thank you.